There's been a worrying trend of late where companies use the words Pro and Ultra on their device names to try to deceive their audience into believing that they're getting a higher powered device or simply a better deal. Well, imagine my worry when Poco came out with this guy. This is the M7 Pro. But does it live up to its Pro name, and is it a true flagship killer? Well, that's what we're going to find out today, so join me as we take a look at the good, the bad and the sometimes ugly of the Poco M7 Pro 5G. With prices starting from just £199 for the 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage option, it's a pretty compelling buy. If you're willing to spend about £40 more though, you will get 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. If I'm honest, I would always recommend spending that extra £40 because you're going to see a pretty significant performance boost, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this video. As we all know, recently companies have been charging us more and giving us less. So what exactly do you get in the box with the M7 Pro 5G? You obviously get the phone itself, but you also get a 45-watt charger, as well as a USB-C cable and perhaps most importantly, a phone case. Sadly though, the phone case isn't colour matched to the phone that you get to choose. There are three main colours. I've got the lilac one here, and I do quite like it. I actually think they called it violet. It's nice. It's not really my style, but it has kind of grown on me. However, the case is just a simple grey case, and I feel like it just looks a bit strange when contrasted with the lilac here. I would have really liked to have seen a colour matched case that just gives it a little bit more style. But honestly, I'm probably just complaining here for complaining's sake. It is a free case and it's a lot more than many other companies are willing to give you in 2025. Let's talk about the phone itself, its build quality and what exactly you're getting for your money. Rather surprisingly, the phone itself is actually made of Gorilla Glass 5 on both the front and the back. The back also has this pretty striking two-tone design. One side is rather frosted, while the other has this 3D ripple wave effect, which is actually really nice. A lot of the time, these Poco devices are pretty polarizing in terms of their design. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. This one feels a lot more understated and actually pretty sophisticated. Sure, the lavender colour I've got here really isn't my cup of tea, but there are two other choices as well, and each one looking really nice and standing out within the Poco range and also the smartphone range in general. You've obviously got the camera bump on the back here too, with those two main cameras, but we'll talk a little bit more about those later. Having a look around the device, you'll see everything you expect to, with a few things that you perhaps wouldn't. Along the bottom of the device, you've obviously got a speaker, a USB-C port and a place for the micro SD card and SIM. On the right hand side, you've got the power button and the volume rocker. Personally, I think I'd have liked to have seen the volume rocker on the opposite side of the device, so the left hand side, because I did tend to hit the power button when trying to turn down the volume and vice versa. Along the top you've got your headphone jack, another microphone as well as an IR blaster, which is actually really useful here. In general, I really like how the phone feels in the hand. It's not too big but also not too small. It's got really nice bezeled curved edges, which means that it doesn't dig into your hand too much like some other candy bar style phones have done in the past. It genuinely feels like a super premium device, especially for that £200 price point. The camera bumps on the back are not small, they're actually pretty huge, but that's because of the camera that we've got here. And those rings are also pretty big, but actually I don't think it matters too much and kind of adds to the overall design of the phone. It's also still pretty thin, coming in at just 7.5mm thick. You're also getting the IP64 both dust and water resistance here too, so actually you're getting a lot of foam for your money. Typically with these lower to mid-range devices, the display is one of the first things that takes a hit, but that really isn't the case in terms of the M7 Pro 5G. You see, we're getting a 6.67-inch AMOLED display here, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It can run up to 120Hz too, though out of the box it is capped to 60Hz, and you can change that in the settings. It's Full HD Plus and has over 400 ppi pixel density, meaning that you're going to get incredible amounts of detail while doing multimedia like Netflix and YouTube, and also while just scrolling social media. They suggest a peak brightness of 2100 nits, meaning that you could use this in both indoor and outdoor conditions with little to no worry. In my testing, I found that it hit around 1,800 nits. This is still pretty respectable, but you won't be able to use this device in direct sunlight. That glare will simply be too much, and that brightness just won't push exactly as it's needed. Being an AMOLED display as well, you do get an always-on display if you choose to use it. This could be something like a clock, notifications, or even a motivational quote or two. There's a ton of customization. We'll talk a little bit more about the customization later on in this video, but honestly, I turned off the always-on display. It really just wasn't something that I felt like was needed, but it's there if you'd like to use it. Under the screen here, you also have the fingerprint reader, and it's pretty fast. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but I actually prefer having it under screen rather than on the side on one of the buttons, because it naturally falls where my thumb or finger would be when using the device anyway, so it doesn't feel like a chore or having to do something extra to actually unlock my device. Along the top of the display is where you've got that front-facing camera. It's 20 megapixels and is absolutely tiny. Seriously, this is one of the smallest front-facing cameras I've ever seen on a phone. It's really discreet and kind of just blended in. I did forget it was there a lot of the time, especially while doing multimedia and playing games. In terms of audio, there is a stereo system here, and it sounds pretty good. You see, the loudspeaker also works as a separate speaker, giving you a stereo surround. It's loud, clear, and doesn't really lack in any particular area. There's a little bit of bass here, but it's not deafening. Obviously, you've got the 3.5mm headphone jack at the top as well if you'd like to use it, and it supports high-res audio at 24-bit 192 kHz. This is actually a very good audio experience, especially for that mid to lower range price point. And it makes this phone a little bit of a multimedia juggernaut. Cameras have become a pretty essential part of any purchase when it comes to a smartphone. And this year, Apple have shown us with the iPhone 16e that a single camera setup can be just as good as all of these multi-camera setups that you get on higher end devices. Seriously, that 16e is one of my favourite cameras this year because it borrows a lot from the Pro and the Pro Max range. Poco saw this, took that idea and absolutely ran with it. There are two main cameras here, though one of them is only really used to take the photos. That is an ultra-wide 50 megapixel camera, and it creates some absolutely stunning images. It's an f1.5 aperture, but the sensor size does mean that you're still going to sacrifice some details. It has phase detection autofocus and optical image stabilization. That optical image stabilization is something that you really can't take for granted on these lower to mid-range devices. It's something that is sorely missed on those kinds of phones, but here I'm so glad it is here because honestly, it makes both the photo and the video experience that much better. There is no ultra-wide, there is no telephoto. There is another lens here, but it is a 2 megapixel camera and is simply used to enable some of those bokeh and depth effects, allowing you to get both of your subject and the background nicely blurred. Rather unsurprisingly, that main 50 megapixel camera, because it's such a high megapixel, does produce some pretty incredible images. If you can get enough white light hitting the sensor, they really are great. Obviously, this isn't going to threaten your regular iPhones or Samsung Galaxy devices. The cameras get the job done. There's enough detail and dynamic range here to produce some great images. The colours look okay, albeit a little too saturated, but they're not too over-sharpened, which certainly happens on these low-end devices. There is some softness and flatness in the images in some scenes, and the low light performance is not the best that you're going to get out there. But honestly, for general purpose and even everyday use, I think the M7 Pro's cameras are pretty stellar. Video is a pretty similar story as well. Because of that optical image stabilization, you're getting some incredible video performance. I was actually surprised because these lower end devices, their video tends to be pretty atrocious, but it just isn't here. It looks pretty comparable to some of the other mid to higher end devices on the market. Let's also quickly talk about that front-facing camera. It's a 20 megapixel camera here and looks pretty good, and as you would expect a front-facing camera to look. There's a little bit of processing going on here, including that beauty mode, which I recommend turning off almost immediately because it doesn't look good and it is incredibly noticeable when you're using it. It's serviceable as a camera, though it definitely is outshined by that back 50 megapixel shooter. Being a phone, we should probably talk connectivity. You've got NFC, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and all of the 5G bands you could ever expect. I never found a point in my testing where the signal was lower or worse than it was on my iPhone 15 or 16 range. You do get the higher end 5G bands, so you'll get that super high fast speeds if you're in an area that supports it. Let's talk about performance, because that's also a little bit of a confusing area. The chip that's in here is the MediaTek Dimensity 7025 Ultra. It's a mid-range chipset that really does not live up to the Ultra name that they've given it, sadly. As mentioned, there are two main configurations here. There's the 8GB and there's the 12GB. I would always recommend going with that 12GB option. It's about £40 difference, but you will absolutely see a difference in the performance of the device. In synthetic benchmarks like Geekbench, we're actually finding that the M7 Pro managed to stick with other phones in the same price range and even outperform some of them. What does that mean in terms of day-to-day usage? The M7 Pro feels incredibly smooth to use on a day-to-day basis, be that surfing social media, emails, surfing the web, maybe even playing some games and multimedia. Sure, this isn't going to be a gaming powerhouse. You're not going to be playing Call of Duty Mobile and Genshin Impact at the highest settings, but they will still play at that lower setting rate, even with that 120Hz display enabled. I never really saw the phone chugging while just browsing and using it on a day-to-day basis. Let's move on to the software experience. It's a pretty standard affair when it comes to Xiaomi and Poco. If you've used their devices before, you'll already know what the OS is like here. It's Android 14 with HyperOS built on top of it. I really like this skin of Android because it's simple, easy to use and incredibly customizable. It sadly did come with a pretty large amount of bloatware. Games, AliExpress, TikTok, all of that jazz. It is easy enough to remove though, it's just an inconvenience to have to do it the first time you purchase the phone. It's incredibly easy and versatile in terms of customization too. You can use the app drawer or you can not. You can have an always on display, you can change the colours and the themes. My only real issue with it is its lock screen. By default, it will automatically choose random photos from the internet, and some of these will include adverts as well. Now, I'm all for this being a lower end device, but having adverts baked in by default on the lock screen is really not something that I want to be seeing, even in this mid to lower range price point. Sure, it's easy to remove by just adding your own lock screen photos. It will stop randomly choosing them for you. So it's an easy fix, but I just wish I didn't have to do that in the first place. One feature that is missing that I'm sure many people will not care about, but some people may, is Xiaomi AI. This is obviously a mid-range chipset, so you're not going to be able to use all of those really nice AI features that you perhaps could do on the higher end devices. I don't miss them here though. I can still use Google Gemini by just holding down the power button for a few seconds and talking to it like I would any other virtual assistant. Gemini does 95% of what I would need it to. Sure, there's not things like certain AI photo and video enhancements, but as I say, I just don't really miss them here. In terms of software support, Poco have up to 4 years of software support here, which is pretty incredible, especially for that price point. Finally, let's talk battery. Unlike the F series, you're not going to get a silicon carbon battery here. You're just getting a standard lithium-ion battery. It's really not that much of a big deal though, especially because this guy has a 5110 mAh battery, and that is big enough to actually get me through a whole day, if not sometimes two, depending on my usage. Coupled with the mid-range chipset, on my day-to-day basis, I found myself finishing a day from pretty heavy usage at around 20%. If you're a slightly lighter user, you might even find yourself ending the day with 40 to 50% of battery left, which is pretty amazing considering. The charging situation on both the Xiaomi and other sub-brand devices has always been pretty good. It charges at up to 45 watts, which is actually pretty quick, and can go from 0 to 100% in around about an hour. There is no wireless charging here sadly, but again, it's not really something that I'm missing because I tend to use a cable whenever I charge my devices anyway. So there we have it. That is the Poco M7 Pro 5G. In a world where Poco and all of their sub-brands appear to be releasing a device almost every other day, it can be really hard to know which device is going to be the best bang for your buck and which one is the best to go for. If you're looking for an incredibly elegant looking phone that has a solid camera, great software, and a really nice user experience, then the M7 Pro 5G might just be right for you. If you're looking for an absolute powerhouse in terms of performance, then this phone probably isn't for you and you should be looking at something slightly higher end. Though for 95% of people, I think this phone is going to look great and you play even better. So why don't you guys let me know what you think of the M7 Pro 5G in the comment section down below. And of course, while you're down there as well, why don't you get subscribed, because it genuinely does mean the world to me. Anyway guys, my name's been Robert, this has been Bite Size Clue, and I will catch you in the next one. Adios.